We think a lot in 10%, but not 10x. We struggle to 10x our ambition, 10x our aspirations, think bigger about our vision. And it took me a consulting engagement in 2015 in San Francisco to really understand what it means to think big. When I talk about entrepreneurship, I should actually talk more about ownership and equity, because you can have ownership in equity that appreciates. That's in a property, that's in stocks and shares, that's in a privately held company, a startup. Where you're born and where you start off in life doesn't determine where you end up. I back myself. We don't do that enough. I genuinely back myself. I believe so deeply in who I am and what I do. The more I've leaned into my skill set as my safety net, the more I've never had to financially worry, even though I'm not a millionaire.
Appreciate you coming on today. And you know what? I wanted to start off today with a bit of a more open question. And an open question just generally on like the scene or even like the UK economy in general. Because like I've been very frustrated about what's been happening in this country over the last couple of years. But obviously with you, you've been like very vocal. You've had your finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening from startups to like scale ups and just in general through the work that you've done. And I just wanted to get a sense from you, like, what's your opinion on like the status of the UK economy right now?
So I think to really answer this question, I want to zoom out and look at macro, like economically, the life that I've experienced. When I was a kid, my parents were in, humble jobs, minicab driver, nursery nurse. They could afford the rent. We could go to school. We could have food. They could afford electricity. Like on the humble wages that they were on, like we had a good standard of life growing up in North London in Tottenham. If my parents were to try to start today with those same jobs and that same income, they would really struggle, because what's happened in the last 30 years is that actually relative income and productivity stayed quite flat here in the UK, while inflation and the cost of living has gone up and up and up and up. So what that means in simple terms is it's become extremely expensive to live here despite being on a 6-figure salary. When I started my career 20 years ago, and if you told me like, oh, you earn 6 figures, I would think the type of house that I would live in, neighborhood I could live in, the lifestyle that I would have, compared to so many people that I know today that earn 6 figures, and don't forget that's when you get into that higher tax bracket as well, and actually cost of living wise, they're living a humble life. They can't afford the finer things in life. So I think economically we need to realize that, like, it feels almost impossible to work your way out of this problem that we're in today in the UK. I think one of the only options is to have an entrepreneurial pursuit. And that might sound controversial, but people's wages aren't getting increased at the rate that it needs to keep up with the cost of living in this country. If anything, we're seeing a lot of job cuts. And what people don't understand with a lot of these cuts at Google and at Microsoft, at Meta, the cuts at Google is funding the hardware that's necessary for AI to be built. But if you don't understand that on the surface, you're just like, oh, they're just cutting jobs, they can afford these people. No, they're actually like apportioning that same money to invest in what they think the future of the world is. So you need to think based on where you are, like, what is my genius? What is my unique skill set? And actually, how can I package myself up, that value proposition, and really monetize on what I have? Because everyone in their work today is a limited expression of themselves, and they may not fully realize it until you get to a certain point. But what does it look like to be a full expression of yourself? And how can you do more of that work that you love, being a full expression of yourself? Now, back to your original question around like what is happening with startups and scale-ups. I think people are getting confused who are starting businesses because they're hearing this narrative from venture capitalists that actually you need to focus on this path to profitability. But they don't understand that that's a short-term narrative, because that venture capitalist wants you to survive at least the next 2 years so that we hopefully get out of this environment. But their business model is still the same. They need to make fund returns, which means they need you to grow exponentially so that they can 3x their fund and return money back to their investors. So if I'm a VC and I've raised $100 million or pounds, I need to essentially return 300 million pounds. The challenge is I only own maybe 5% of your company. So actually, to return 300 million pounds, you need to sell for at least 4 billion or more for me to be able to return that to my investors. So in the short term, you're hearing, oh, the path to profitability. But in the long term, the game is the same. I need you to become a fund returner. So it's really hard right now for startups who are trying to go down that path, who don't even really fully understand the business model of a VC. and the fact that it's not right for the majority of founders. And then you have founders that are bootstrapping and maybe thinking about an angel round or getting a little bit of money in. But again, angel investors are so fragmented. It's like, how do you find an angel? How do you know whether they're in or out of the money? Like, so again, it's not as easy, as sadly as it sounds like on the surface. They're not marketing themselves like a VC would. Then in terms of scale-ups, I'm seeing kind of two different divergent paths. One is, do you know what, they're trying to cut costs aggressively to get to that point of profitability. And some of them you're seeing are raising down rounds as a result of that, you know, a lower valuation than the last round in order to just get money into the business to hopefully pivot and get to a place performance-wise where they can actually survive. And then sadly, the other path that I'm seeing a lot is a lot of these scaling ups like actually shutting down or getting acqui-hired for IP or technology, and it's a buyer's market right now. If you're in private equity or in a company that has cash and can afford to acquire to grow, you can acquire companies on the cheap now because valuations have reset, they've fallen, and if I haven't got many options, I have to consider this option of selling my business. So we're seeing that a lot more in the market now as well.
Very comprehensive answer. So many different places I want to pick up on. Yeah. But I want, like, there's a interesting balance, right? With what you said about we're living a limited expressions of ourselves and we want to be a full expression of ourselves. And if I compare that with, say, entrepreneurship, where on paper it means like pursue your passion, do what you need to, but also puts a lot of pressure on yourself. And then again, if you run a business which you want to get investment for, you're now under someone else's fund rather, because this VC is going to be on your case to make sure you work all the hours of the day.
Absolutely.
So then you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place of like, do I want to pursue this entrepreneurship thing to take myself out of where I am now, or do I want to just stay comfortable doing what I'm doing, earning, maybe not going crazy with it, but I'm still getting by? Like, how should people be thinking about the balance between the two?
So I think, when I think about people that transition careers, so transitioning from a full-time corporate job into entrepreneurship, I think it's actually an iterative journey. I don't think it's, let me hand in my notice today and tomorrow I'm out in the wild and now I'm going to start thinking about what I'm going to do. I think, like for me, I read a book 20 years ago called, I read a lot of books, but what is your genius at work? By Dick Richards. And in this book, it basically asks you questions around purpose to really discover what your genius is in no more than 2 words.
What does genius mean in this context?
Your genius means actually like that skill set that is uniquely placed within you. You know, like what's that thing that you're really exceptional at? Okay, and I think people struggle sometimes with that word because it's not a job title. People are naturally think in terms of job titles because that's what you've been conditioned to, given that you've been in all of these jobs. Hence why when you introduce yourself at an event, hey, my name is X and this is what I do. You even say that before saying you're a father or whatever, like this is what I do. That's your identity. So my genius is that I'm an authentic connector. Like when I connect authentically with someone, then I can solve people problems. And I know that I'm just very uniquely placed globally to do that. And my personal mission is all around like, how do I create pathways to opportunity through entrepreneurship for people like us? So I'm very selective on what projects people want to bring me on as a trusted advisor for me to consult or coach on to see if it aligns with both my genius and if it aligns with my personal mission. But in order to make that transition, what I would do now and what I know now is I would first try and spend that time doing that introspection and that self-awareness around what is my genius? Where's that intersection between what I'm great at, what I enjoy, and what I receive feedback on? And when I say what I receive feedback on, people are actually a lot worse than they think at paying attention to feedback. So I'll give you an example because I'm a journaler. I call my journal a tracker, and I'm going to touch on it later in this conversation, I'm sure. But I spoke last week at Athletes Investor Summit as of this recording. And I'm on stage with 2 other people, and it's only 25 minutes, it's short. But I know before arriving on stage that I'm going to shell. Like I know that I'm going to drop knowledge. I know that people are going to get wisdom and value because I'm so confident and competent in this area of expertise, which is angel investing. I believe I'm top 5% in the world at talking at this topic. I'm just know it at that depth. And I bring such humanity to the way that I have that discussion. It differentiates me from most other people that speak about this topic. So I know confidently before I go on stage, whatever you ask, I don't mind. I can take it to the places that I need to go. So I do the panel, and one of the panelists messaged me, and they give me feedback on like WhatsApp because he knows me. I take a screenshot, I save it in my tracker, and the word that stuck out to me was passion. The other panelist then emails me like he really enjoyed it, and the word that stuck up to him was wisdom and authenticity. And I know time and time again, when I get feedback, it's always skirting around those 3 words. I call it like the sage. Like, people value my wisdom and education. They believe that I'm really authentic, so they connect with me and they feel like I'm almost a friend when I've left that experience with them. But then they also value the fact that I'm really passionate about what I do, and it just comes across whenever I talk. So I didn't used to see like passion as a strength, for example. And we spoke about this a little bit before the podcast, or I heard you talk about it before we started recording this podcast. But passion is so infectious. People want to be around passionate people. Small people talk about people, average people talk about things, great people talk about ideas. When you're passionate, you talk about ideas. And people want to be around that. So I'm starting to recognize these things as strengths, which makes it easier for me to play at my strengths. I think that's the first step first before you even think about handing in your notice, knowing yourself to that level. And it might take time. It might take a week, a month, a year, but the time is necessary to go on that path of discovery, you know? The second step is actually, how can I start just being of use to people, even if it's free? Because the currency that you want back isn't actually money, it's feedback and validation that you're taking a step in the right direction with what you think you want to do. If I look at our mutual friend Maz, he was working at the British Medical Journal, and I remember introducing him to his first couple of clients, and he was doing it either for free or dirt cheap. But what was given him was a confidence in his self-esteem around his skill set and his craft, and that he's great at what he does. And that's what he needed to start taking the leap to say, actually, I want to lean into this more. Because he started figuring out, this is my pocket, e-commerce companies. This is my pocket, translating culture. This is my pocket, this is the type of market I want to help them with. You know, and you want to figure that out while you're getting paid in your academy, which is what you call your job. Yeah, I'm getting paid to learn doing this 9 to 5, but while I'm doing it, I'm actually learning this external lesson that's going to give me validation and relationships to get me into replacing my income, which is like your first goal. Because entrepreneurship is both selfless and selfish. It's selfless in that you're in service of something greater than yourself, which is your customers and your clients. But it's selfish in that it takes a lot of your time. It takes you away from loved ones, your partner, your kids. So it's a very conscious balance you're doing here of, I love these 2 things, but they're at tension with each other because I need to be ruthlessly prioritizing and manage my time effectively. So that's the mindset you should have when like building those relationships, testing out your value proposition, testing out the service and getting feedback and understanding, this is what I do. I don't think you should be doing that after you've left. You should start to do that while you're in that job. And that will give you the confidence and conviction, as well as the first customers, to help you take that leap.
Yeah, excellent. Because when I reflect back on my journey, and like when I was working on things outside of work. But I think there's a difference between working on side hustles and working strategically in terms of what you're going to do next and making the right connections. Because one of the things that I've learned now after many, many years of entrepreneurship is like your network is your network.
100%.
And especially if you're able to have a business where you already know who your customers can be 100%. And you're already serving them in a way whereby you're getting paid, because it's easy to give something away for free. It's harder to actually make people pay for it
100%.
and actually pay for it at a place where it's even exceeds your own imagination, as it were.
That last part is really important.
Yeah.
Exceeding your own imagination. Because what I've noticed in Britain, especially culturally, is that we think a lot in 10%, but not 10x.
Yes.
We struggle to 10x our ambition, 10x our aspirations, think bigger about our vision. And it took me a consulting engagement in 2015 in San Francisco to really understand what it means to think big. And the thing about us as humans is that we're similar to water in that water will fill and consume the vessel that it's in, like this cup. The same is true for ambition. If I set a small ambition, I can expand to the size and the level of that ambition. But if I set a grand ambition, it gives me more space to maneuver and expand into. And we struggle to think 10x, especially as Londoners, because we're in London. Whereas if I was in Accra, Ghana, or in Bogota, Colombia, like I have no choice but to think global, because local's not big enough.
That's such an interesting one, because you'd think that if you're in, like, say, a village in Bogota or in Nigeria, that because you can't see anything, then your vision should be limited.
But you
it
can
shows
see
you that
so
the
much
possibilities-
because you get so much Western influence on the internet and on TV, and that's why I like watching basketball and playing football. You're seeing so much global influence. If anything, not enough of the globe are seeing you.
Because the cultural thing is such a key thing in the UK. Like, I have these conversations all the time where, let's just say someone, like, you started this conversation talking about six-figure salaries, and then most recently Jeremy Hunt was saying that, six-figure salary is not a lot of money to live in, to live on, which contextually makes sense. However, the conversation changes from the average annual salary in the UK is 33, 100k is 3x that. How can you complain if you're on 100k? Rather than saying, wait a second, is 33k even enough?
Yeah.
Like, how do we change that to be higher?
Absolutely.
And it's like, we should be aiming to raise the profile, raise the ambition, raise the salaries of everyone around us, rather than because that person gets paid this much and he gets paid that much, he should also be paid low as well. It doesn't make sense like that.
100%. And that's all about perspective. Yeah. And the truth is that we're both part of this 1% of top earners in the UK. But people don't understand that bracket is so wide that the fact that we're 1.0001, there's people that are making $1 million a year and more who is completely different stratosphere to us, opportunity-wise even. Like I remember when the stamp duty thing got introduced with second houses owning a second property, and there was a part of that law was if you buy 7 properties at once, you don't have to pay it. Who can afford to buy 7 at once? Yeah. So what you start to realize is the ruling class who are wealthy are always in protection of the bourgeoisie and themselves. And because they fund a lot of our politics and they're also the business owners, they're actually maintaining power. So when we see what happened exactly with Diane Abbott in the news, and you're like, wait, that person was racist to her and nothing's happened. But if it was anti-Semitic, then there'd be action taken. But what you realize in those situations, and I'm not for that either, but what you realize in those situations is that the reason nothing happened to him is because he's part of the power. I invested 10 million into your party. Well, what's the problem? You're flying on my private jet. I'm going to give you 5 million next year as well. You're dependent on me. I'm part of your life source. It's like you being in hospital and you're getting the drip. I'm your drip. And that's the situation we're in, where power is so conflated with influence and politics in this country that we are the subject of either you're part of that class or you're being subject to feeling the impact of that class. So the only way to maneuver up that chain, even if quietly, is through entrepreneurship and creating your own value and creating your own wealth to go on that journey. Like, the job is not going to be enough for that, unfortunately.
And even with entrepreneurship, because there is still a market difference between, say, Silicon Valley startups versus UK startups. And so what's capping that ambition?
I think there's 2 things there, actually. First is that when I talk about entrepreneurship, I should actually talk more about ownership and equity. Because you can have ownership in equity that appreciates. That's in a property, that's in stocks and shares, that's in a privately held company, a startup. And you could be an investor that's never actually started your own business. Actually, your business is this investment business. That, for me, is what I'm talking about as entrepreneurship. Not just, I need to create my own business and sell my services or my products. Right, so we need to expand the definition of actually what wealth creation means in this country and ownership. In terms of Silicon Valley, you have to remember that, like, even when I look at a lot of the VC investors in the UK and I look at their backgrounds, a lot of them were bankers. And a lot of the high net worth individuals that angel investors are also bankers in Europe. So bankers, what are they doing day to day? They're taking calculated risk based on like Excel spreadsheets. So when I'm investing in startups, I'm using the same mental model to take calculated risks in this asset class, which is really about outliers and actually acknowledging that, no, we need to take higher risk in order to make higher return. So how that plays out in Europe is the safe space is B2B tech. Predictable revenue, bigger outcomes in terms of acquisitions. So that's where we're going to play. In the US, there's a bit of a different mentality, and that's why they can come up with all these consumer brands like Facebook and Google and all of these initially consumer brands, and Snapchat, Instagram. It can't come out of Europe because we can't nurture that because we don't invest in that.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Spotify is an exception to the rule. And a lot of that capital, later stage capital, came from the US for Spotify. Whereas in Silicon Valley, when I was out in San Francisco, which is a short distance, the culture there was failure is a badge of honor. The culture in the UK, failure you should be ashamed of. It's private. Don't share it. Can't put it on your CV. Silicon Valley is a badge of honor. It's seen as part of anyone's journey of success. You got to fail to get to success. You got to pivot to get to success. It's a badge of honor. Different philosophy. There's a philosophy in America called the American Dream. You've never heard of the British Dream. The American Dream says that I can go from nothing to something at any point.
Yeah.
And a whole country believing that is powerful.
That is a brand and a half.
It's a brand. And American are the chief exports of globalization since World War II. Nike, Apple, Google, all of these are global. They're now at odds the fact that you're getting Chinese people exporting TikTok. That's like, we haven't had that previously. Previously, it's been inside China. When you look at these companies that Chinese people start, Alipay, Alibaba, it's been a lot of Chinese wealth built in China, serving China, right? In the Britain, we follow suit in America in terms of global exports, but we haven't followed in the same pace. If you look around entertainment, sport, entrepreneurship, a lot of our heroes, especially our black heroes, are American. You know, media platforms, American, right? So culturally, they're reinforcing this type of culture and conditions that spurs on that high risk taking environment of an entrepreneur. You know, whereas in the UK, we're too private with it. We're not very open. You know, there's like an open source culture in America. We're like very closed here in the UK.
So how do you think, can it be changed, or do you think it's a cultural thing that's embedded?
Oh, absolutely. So I think there's a big relationship between mindset, behaviors, environments. I'll give myself as a good example of this. Right? I grew up in Tottenham, North London, and at a young age, I just was very grateful that my parents migrated to the UK from Ghana, and I just always recognized that as like, I can't take the piss of this opportunity that I've got here. And around me, I had a lot of role models, but were, you know, sometimes making money in the easiest ways possible, which are not necessarily the right ways possible. But my mindset from a young child was always the transferable skills that I could see in that person. Like, yeah, you are drug dealing, but actually, if you took lower risk with higher return, you could be a trader. I can see the same skill set. It's like buy low, sell high, customer retention, acquiring new customers, treating them well. I could see the parallels. So my mindset was geared like that. And when I started reading books, whether it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad initially, and some of those personal development books, and that's a much wider array, again, it helped me travel mentally to the worlds that were being created in these books and the mindsets and perspectives that were in these books. Then when I got to travel physically on a plane, again, it got me to appreciate different cultures. I went backpacking to South America when I was 21, and my friends were saying it's not a black thing to do. You know, like how could you do that? Are you crazy? One of the best experiences in my life till today, even though I was, you know, having young people in Bolivia calling me Michael Jackson at the time. But expanded my mindset, and it always drilled into me like where you're born and where you start off in life doesn't determine where you end up. So my mindset was expanded. The next thing that I needed to change was a physical environment. I was like, I can't always travel to experience that difference. And I started being really selective around who are the friends that I want to keep around me, who are motivating, who are encouraging, who are always thinking big, who was talking about ideas versus who's talking about people, gal all the time, smoking weed all the time, And I was like, I had to change up the circle because I knew that the environment's going to impact my results. The same way who you hire as a team impacts what you can create as a business, because it's the people that are the assets. So that makes a big difference, and that's how we change here in the UK. You start with your mindset, and then you change your environment, and it translates in behaviors, which leads to impact. You know, and we can do that in micro ways. You know, like how you hire, like who are your friendship groups, who are communities that you join. Because we're all in search of our tribe, we're building our tribes, and sometimes the tribes interlink and there's overlap in the tribes. Like with Angel Investing School, my business, like that's a tribe, but there's a culture there. There's a way people have a spirit of service. The reason they're attracted is because I externalize my culture often through content and events. So I attract people that are attracted to that culture. So it's not surprise the kind of people that I attract into that tribe.
It's interesting as well because it's such a culturally different thing from what you would expect from British people, because like you have to be open and willing to put yourself out there and showcase what you're passionate about, what you've learned, and go against your grain, as it were. Because you put that example of when you went to South America. I remember when I went backpacking in Indonesia.
I remember you telling me.
It was crazy. Do you know what I mean? They called you, what they call you, Michael Jackson? They were calling you 50 Cent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, it gives you the perspective of like what is out there, and that there's so much more to life.
Absolutely.
And it's just when you come back to the UK and then you have to like, I don't know, it's like you have to find your tribe as well.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to like find people who are willing to be on the same wavelength as you and push yourself, because I can be guilty of it. I put my hands up, like it's easy to live on autopilot.
Yeah.
And it's easy to expect things to change for you, but things won't change until you actually make a change. Yeah. And like when I think of your career in the earlier stages where you started as an accountant, like you done accounts, management
consultant.
No, but you done accounts, didn't you?
Oh yeah. Technically, yeah. I studied accounts at uni, and I did a 1 year placement in accounts and then temped as an accountant. This is true.
What I'm saying. This is true. So you could have gone with the flow and like sold yourself a dream of like, okay, I'm gonna do this for a while, but then you've done that, you became a management consultant, and then you end up in Silicon Valley. So like, that was probably like what, 10 years from now today, right? 2020.
It was 2015. I was in Silicon Valley.
2015, you were Silicon Valley. So like nearly 10 years now.
Yeah.
So what drove you to make that decision to go work abroad for a year? Yeah,
that's a great question. So we're gonna get a bit deeper now, but I'll be honest and open with you here. So when I was at EY, which was my first management consulting job, my first professional job, I got into that place of work because my late mentor, Francis Mayno, rest in peace, he introduced me to two people that worked in EY and one person that used to work there. And then he would answer all my stupid questions. What's an auditor? What's M&A mean? What does a marketing department do versus finance? So he would help me translate all of the language that I spoke in the ends to language that makes sense in this environment. And then when I spoke to those people he introduced me to, I started to understand the rules of the engagement. I understood where the boundaries of the playground was. I understood how to interview well and the stories that I need to tell and the language they used around stakeholder management and communication skills and teamwork and the kind of examples I should talk to when talking about what's my biggest weakness. And I got trained in the way that they receive people. And as soon as I got into the job, and I remember because I went through this experience with someone else on my estate, a good friend of mine, Henry, and he got into the auditing path at EY. We both applied and got into EY. And there's a direct correlation to the fact that I had access to that person and therefore that information. And from there, there's two things that really stuck with me. One is I want to be that person to gain access to information and knowledge and create pathways for others to get in. And across my career, I've been doing that whether through businesses or just referring people into jobs. The second thing that stuck with me was that it felt like a stone in the shoe. It was irritating. It was like, there's so many people with potential like me that will never get in here because they didn't have a Francis like I did. And that irritated me. Because when I got in, I was like, I can do this. Yeah. This is mine. I can learn this. Why are these not stressing? Like one of my brethren got stabbed the other week. That's stress. This ain't stress. So I just had a perspective of like, almost like Machiavellian a bit, like, fam, I'm from the roads, fam. This is easy. Not in a disrespectful way, but to learn and to be coached and to use Excel and to PowerPoint, that is low risk, it's safe. I'm not going to jail. I'm allowed to step in that postcode. There's no one on me. So that was easy. That was stress-free. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I saw my journey as like, all right, if I stay here 15 years, there's a path to directorship or partnership. But I was like, that's not it, man. That's becoming what they want me to become for them, based on this vision that I've inherited and these principles that I'm inheriting and this culture that I'm inheriting. But what's my vision? What's my principles? Like, where am I trying to go in terms of my skill set? And that's why I was like, this path isn't for me. So 2 years in, they're like, do you want to go into, what was that, the customer space or strategy space? They both want you. I was like, nah, I need to go and get different experiences. I'm entrepreneurial, and in the evenings and weekends at that time, I was running Mixtape Madness with my brother and a few friends. So I was like, nah, this is not enough for me. It's such a limited expression of myself. I didn't have this language back then, but looking back, that's exactly what it was. And you have to remember, like, when it's your first job as an entry-level person, you don't have the career confidence. So I was maybe like 40% of my true self, except when I'm around a few like black people from ends inside of the firm, because I'm trying to assimilate and I'm trying to fit in. Whereas now, like, my value add is the fact that I am who I am and I've got my locks and I make these authentic connections and people are refreshed by that. Whereas back then I didn't have that career confidence. So I end up leaving EY. I go backpacking across East Africa this time with my younger brother and a friend of mine because I want to share the experience with people from back home. Incredible experience. And I remember I secured a job in like a digital agency for when I got back because I thought, for some reason, digital agency was close to entrepreneurship and it really wasn't. And it was a WPP agency called VML. And I remember stepping into that job when I got back. I remember landing back when I got back and learning that my dad had passed away. So it was like fight or flight mode. Like, let me just work. Like, I didn't really want to consoling people. I just wanted to outwork the situation. I don't know if I needed therapy or whatever back then, but I wanted to outwork the situation. So I get into that job and I'm working hard every day, just want to get through it. It's like escapism. And they pull me aside one day and they're like, oh, it's not quite working out, Andy. I'm like, rah. Like, I've never felt like that before. Like, whoa, what? Like, I wasn't good enough. Or like, yeah, you're working a bit too different to how we're used to. And so we can put this down as like a temp experience. And, you know, I was like, cool. All right. So for me, and this is the thing, I think people react differently to adversity, but when I'm in a corner, I think that's when I thrive because I'm like, all right, it's like, I don't know, it's like being at a rave and like beef kicks off and these lot are after you and I got to get out and I'm familiar with that situation. So I'm very at home with being in a corner. So I come out of that situation, I'm like, I need to return back to first principles. I like entrepreneurship and I know management consulting. Yeah. So what's at the intersection of the two? Let me go to like a startup consultancy. So I interview for this consultancy, do their assessment center. Everyone's from like Oxford and Cambridge. So I thought, here we go again. But like, I'm in an effort mode of my life right now because I've been let go of a job. My dad's passed away and I just feel like, I just need to be who I am right now. I just need to be 100% my most authentic self. So I remember like the recruiter at the time, he's a very good friend of mine now, Alex. He's like, can you tell me about yourself? And I say, and I remember starting the conversation saying, I want to share why me in 3. I want to say what my family would describe me as, what my friends would describe me as, and what my colleagues would describe me as. I think I got the job from that first answer. Because it was so differentiated, but such an acute awareness of who I was and how I was perceived that I know that it just felt like there's something here. He's not Oxford, he's not Cambridge, but there's something here. So I ended up getting into that role, moved to South Africa initially to work with Investec and all these like banking clients out there. And then one of the partners that joins the company was new at the time, a guy called Brandon from America. He's like, I've got an opportunity. We're thinking about setting something up in San Francisco. We don't know what it looks like yet, but it's some sort of strategic outpost. Like, are you interested? I know how entrepreneurial you are. I've interviewed a few people around the firm. I want you to come with me. So I go out to San Francisco, stay there for just under a year, end up networking and building relationships with Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia Capital, Greylock Partners, and Lightspeed Ventures. And that was like a fast track MBA. I was just taking it in, like, yeah. And it just expanded my mind. So it just upgraded my mentality. You know, I felt like I was an operating system and my operating system got upgraded. Yeah. So I came back to the UK with just a different mindset. And I was like I left that job, but that consultancy ended up listing on the alternative investment market. So they floated a 35 million float during COVID. It was an incredible outcome for them and their founding partners. And it was off the back of that business in San Francisco. And one thing that, like, looking back is that I'm not afraid to sacrifice and forego opportunities because I understand how it fits into my next thing. Ernst & Young was like that. Like, oh, look at the track to become director and partner. I forego that opportunity. My worst case scenario is I can get back into Ernst & Young. That's my worst case scenario. What a privilege it is that's my worst case scenario. And not only can I get into there, I can do a bad boy job for them. I am a great consultant. I'm great with relationships, great with stakeholders, great with facilitation. I know my pocket. You know, I'm not saying that from a place of arrogance. I'm saying it from a place of confidence. And we don't have that enough here in the UK. Americans are full of it, even when they haven't even got it. Yeah. So I come back to the UK. I joined a high growth startup called World First, and I was their first product manager. it was really interesting because at the time I felt like we were in a fight market-wise with TransferWise, because they were both FX companies but very different approaches. And I wanted to take a more technological approach to winning, but World First had a very sales-driven culture at the time. So I remember going to Jonathan Quinn, who I have a good relationship with now. He was the CEO and the founder of World First. And I had this presentation about how FX margins are getting squeezed to the bottom and we need to innovate and completely change our business model and go more into banking or something different. And looking back, it's like, wow, I had the audacity to go to the founder of this business and tell him that his business trajectory-wise is heading for failure.
Mad.
Crazy. But that was such a good tutelage in the pressures of high growth environments and being in the start. I think that's around where I met you initially, actually. And World First ended up having a good outcome. They got acquired by Ant Financial for like $700 million. But for me, I felt like we lost because TransferWise is worth multiple, like over $6 billion.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a very different perspective. Like, how is that a loss? It's 700 million. And yes, because the market leader at what we were doing is making 6 billion.
Yeah.
I was on the team that lost. Champions League final, we lost. Who remembers the person that lost in the final versus the winner? So it's that deep to me when I think about competition and winning in the market. So I ended up leaving that experience. I hope this is all right that I'm walking through it.
Keep going. Keep going. I'm keeping signposts in my head.
I ended up leaving that experience and saying to myself, I want to do something entrepreneurial again. Yeah. So I joined this accelerator program called Entrepreneur First. And as you know, it's all about talent first investing. So how can we bring together co-founders who haven't met before, get them to form a relationship and to start a business? What I learned through there out of self-awareness is that's the opposite of the person I am. I need deep relationships with people to build trust and to know that I want to go on a 10, 20-year journey in building a business with you. It's impossible for me to get that in just 3 months. I learned that through that process. But what I also learned is that I did a podcast. I was releasing a podcast at the time that I never released called Technicity. And I was planning to do it with a lady called Deborah, who is the founder of YSYS. Not many people know this. And I recorded a number of episodes at the time before bringing her into the project. And one of the people that I interviewed was Arlen Hamilton, the founder of Backstage Capital. She had nothing to something story. She'd raised just under 10 million in venture funding for a fund. She was investing in underrepresented founders in the US. And then after the conversation, I said, hey, Arlen, what you're describing is really similar to here in the UK and Europe. I think you should come over and check it out. I can plug you into the right networks and people and whatnot. And she was like, yeah, I'll come over. So she came over. I was like, right, let me sort out an itinerary, like VCs, LP investors, angel investors, founders, private and public events. And one of the public events, I don't know if you attended, was at Boulderton Ventures, where we did a fireside chat. And then in one of the private meetings, she said, Andy, you don't know it yet, but I want to make you the managing director of my new accelerator business. That really taught me in that moment 2 things. One is, Andy, you just need to keep doing what you're doing and staying in flow, and you're an opportunity magnet. Opportunities will come. And it's a really hard thing to accept when you're thinking about financial stability.
That's what I was going to ask you, because you've gone through a lot, in terms of ups and downs, and you still had a plan. Because the way it sounds to me is that you had the plan of, say, entrepreneurship, but you didn't necessarily know where it's going to be or what it might look like. Yeah. And so you've just come off the back of World First. You're doing the EF program. You've learned a lot, so it's not the outcome that you would have expected. Yeah. And now Arlen's here and she's throwing another opportunity to you, because there's 2 ways that you can look at that. You can say, okay, I'm going to take this, but you can also start questioning, is it part of my journey? Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. This is wisdom, what you're sharing.
Yeah, because
you can interpret it in both ways. Yeah. And that's why it's a risk, both ways. I don't take it, I might miss out on risk. I take it, and there's a lot of lessons I've taken from taking that opportunity as well. But there's 2 things that I have to say, I back myself. We don't do that enough. I genuinely back myself. I believe so deeply in who I am and what I do. And my mentor said this, and it always stuck with me, that your skill set is your safety net. My safety net isn't financial, it's my skill set. So I know that when Arlen asked me to join her on Backstage, to that point, I've never worked in an accelerator business. I've never built an accelerator's program before. I've never delivered content or sessions on an accelerator. I've never hired a team for any startup type of unit like that before from scratch. There's a lot of things I was doing for the first time, but great people can do great things when doing it for the first time. My CV it's just a limited expression of myself. My lived experience will tell you that Andy is someone that recognizes that everything is figure outable. He's a problem solver. He's a continuous learner, and he grows leaps and bounds when in these situations when he's pushed into a corner. That's not going to be on my CV, but that's why I knew that I would be great at that role, and I was, right? So that role really put me on the map, I think, here in the UK, because it was investing in underrepresented founders. It was the first ever of its kind of doing that thing. We were doing it in LA, Detroit, Philadelphia, but I attracted it so that it was in the UK as well. So it brought a lot of education and awareness around this path of venture capital as an option. And I remember like one of the chats I did with Arlen in a private setting had Namdi, the founder of the Finally. And I realized this years later when he told me this, but he said that, Andy, you don't realize that in that room when I was in that crowd, you're the one that made me aware of venture capital as a path that I could take to build this business. And he's raised over 3 million to date, like for the Finally. I've actually invested in his startup. But it's so beautiful to know that you can curate a space in a room where someone can take such value and knowledge that it then leverages and is utilized on the journeys that they go on. Yeah. And that's what I mean about entrepreneurship, creating pathways to opportunities for people. Like, so for me, like going through those journeys and telling those stories, I think the biggest lesson is the more I've leaned into my skill set as my safety net, the more I've never had to financially worry, even though I'm not a millionaire. So I'm in this pocket myself where I'm financially in a good place. I've got 2 kids. Like one of my daughters is privileged and going to an independent school. I never put them on social media because that's part of my boundaries and my principles. But actually, when I take stock of where I am in life and my family and the position that we're in, and I talk to my 20-year-old self, this is where he dreamed to be. Working in entrepreneurship, working with entrepreneurs, just shifting mindsets, like creating pathways to opportunities. I'm doing all the things that I probably dreamed of loving and wishing that I could do when I was older. And me taking stock of that both makes me humble and grateful, but also reminds me of the importance of just like maintaining the beginner's mindset. I'm always a beginner. I always have more to learn. I'm on that journey of mastery, knowing that I'll never really get there. My role model is Jesus Christ, knowing that I'll never be perfect like him. And accepting that takes a certain humility and putting that ego aside. And I think that's what people appreciate about me especially when they meet me at an event and I'm approachable and I'm answering questions and I'm having just a human connection and conversation with them, rather than that power displacement feeling of this is an investor or somebody somebody's got an MBE and he's treating me other than. I always try and address that displacement or ensure that that's not there, because I was in that seat and someone helped me. So each one teach one. I have to help someone else up the ladder the same way I was helped too.
Have you ever had that experience of yourself though, where you had to actually check your own ego? Like if something was going a bit crazy.
Yeah. And I have all the emotions, like imposter syndrome. I remember seeing jobs when I was younger that I wouldn't apply to because I thought I would never get it. Yeah. That's so crazy to say that to yourself. I'm not even going to have a 1% opportunity here because I'm not even willing to put an application in because I don't believe I'm going to get this opportunity. Yeah. That's mad, It's
crazy. It's like the stories that we tell ourselves before 100%. We even qualified. Because even going back to like Arlen making you MD of Backstage Capital, like that in itself is such a leap, and you have to learn everything from scratch, like the ropes. Do you know what I mean? And even with that, like, how are you understanding what your skill set was and also your passions? Because during the time you were also doing a lot of writing, and so then you was getting yourself in that space, and so you even glossed over the fact that you changed career technically from a consultant to like a product manager. So you yourself, you're like learning all these different skills. So to me, that sounds like you're still searching for something. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
At that time, yes.
At that time, yes, it's like you're searching for something.
Absolutely.
And so I'm interested to know like what was going through your head at that time.
Yeah, it's a great question. So some more context is when I joined Entrepreneur First and left World First, all these firsts, I had my daughter was born. So from a risk profile...
your daughter was born?
Yes. So from a risk profile perspective, I was moving more American than British.
Yeah, facts.
Because it's an absurd risk. On paper, what are you doing? But I think great entrepreneurs have that in them, actually, that little bit of craziness. So I feel more at peace with it now. But at the time, I remember feeling like, when I was at EY, EY was the sun of my universe. If EY say go to Italy for this thing, I'll go to Italy. I don't care about the weekend plans or seeing this lady that I'm trying to court or hanging out with friends or going to the cinema or going to the gym. I'm going to Italy because work said go to Italy. So the work was sun of my universe, and every other planet in my life was rotating around work. When I left World First and I had my daughter, I was like, my family needs to become the sun of my universe, and everything needs to rotate around them. And that sort of shift made a 10x difference, because I started creating principles. I had one called 2 and 5, which meant 2 evenings a week I'll be willing to go out, speak at events, network, see friends. 5 evenings a week I want to be a present father and be home. Till today. Yeah. You know, we're 6 years into it now. So it shaped principles, and principles shape behaviors.
Because that's the hard one as well. Like,
it's opportunity cost all the time.
Opportunity cost, because you know the balance. It's funny actually, because I've learned this lesson before. I've learned this lesson more recently, like when I had my daughter, where like I think by working all the hours, it gets you closer to your destination.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work like that. Yeah. Because where I'll be working,
and you could lose so much along the way, including your marriage and your family.
Precisely. And so now I've like shifted where like I don't work weekends anymore. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Anything I'm doing is late night. Like I'll be up to 2 a.m., 3 a.m. because I know that's when the house is quiet.
Sleep is getting sacrificed for you.
Sleep is getting sacrificed. But I feel it's more impactful. Do you know what I mean? So I 100% get what you mean.
Yeah, and for me, I read a lot of books by people approaching death. I wrote this on LinkedIn recently, like Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom, and When Breath Becomes Air, or what's the one by Clayton Christensen, Not Innovator's Dilemma, like how you measure your life. And all of these books reminded me, like, on my deathbed, what am I really going to ask for? It's my family, it's my loved ones, it's not any of my investments, it's not any of the money, not any of the houses, not any of it's going to be my family. So why wait till then to spend time with them when I can optimize for that now? And that's 100% my mentality. And you know what it's done? It's rarity and scarcity increases prices. So it's made me even more attractive to work with. Because people respect the boundaries, the values, and a lot of them sometimes see that and want that for themselves. So it's made me an even more precious commodity when I go into an experience. Yeah. And there's much more of an appreciation when Andy is spending time in this experience with people, because they understand the trade-off of that time. Nice. You know, where a lot of times, like, especially founders, sometimes they don't appreciate it. They're like, oh, can I have 15 minutes catch up? Can you give me pitch deck feedback? I'm like, the reason that I do the content from the writing up to what I do today, to the reason that I speak at the events, is to scale my impact, because I can't do the coffee catch-ups. So yes, it's not personal one-to-one, because I need to do that for my coaching work and consulting, which is what pays the bills and ultimately allows me to serve and scale my impact. But that's my way of helping you. That's mutually beneficial. And it's hard from your vantage point, when you don't have the empathy with me, to understand why I'm saying no. And sometimes there's a resent there. Yeah. Like, oh, he's not really for us. Oh, he doesn't really like back us. Oh, he's not from the culture. Or he's whatever the reason that they come up with in their head. But again, it's stories that we tell ourselves, which is what you stated before.
And then, so you're searching for that. You found your family. And so talk me a little bit through about like your Backstage Capital experience and it shutting down. And like what that done to you in terms of your own like confidence and feeling of like self-worth. Yeah,
great questions. So Backstage was incredible on one level, because I got to work with value-aligned people. The team there were actually incredible. And Arlen had an amazing vision which galvanized all of us together. And like when I think about like Melinda and Wayne out in SF, or Anissa and Andy here in the UK, like they're incredible talent that are doing incredible things with or without Backstage, you know? But it also revealed to me the inner workings of venture capital and signaling, and the importance of your portfolio rising in valuation, and you getting backed by tier 1 investors, which sends a good signal, which unlocks your ability to raise your next fund. So I learned a first row seat experience in like how venture works and like raising the next fund. And the accelerator was such a powerful global signal to the world in terms of we're here for you. And it's actually a lesson in marketing, actually, if anything, around like never being afraid to speak directly to who you're trying to serve. what I would argue is that I think looking back, there's probably an opportunity to innovate on the model to better serve the people that you're serving. Because if statistically, 0.0, let's say 0%, rounding error, of black women are getting venture capital, is the argument that we should try and get that to 5%, or actually we should create our own pathways, acknowledging that we don't even want that money? That's a real challenge. And I do think more black women need to get venture capital, but I don't think it's 50% of black women. So within that delta is opportunity. So when people apply for this accelerator program, we had 1,800 applicants. What's going through my head is, we've just rejected 99% of them and only taken 25 people. What happens to the 99%? And you have to remember, like I grew up in Tottenham, like, if I start a business and I sell out business for 30 million, that's life-changing money for me, my family. Like, we don't run out of money in this generation. So why am I telling myself that I need to grow a unicorn or $1 billion outcome? Or is that true to my ambition and the outcome that I really want? Or actually does that 30 million unlock the lifestyle and my next chapter and what I really want to do? And I think more of us need to have that honest conversation with ourselves. The other thing that it revealed to me was that that this funding gap is real at this friends and family round, because if you're from working class backgrounds, you're underrepresented. Who's your friends and family that can actually afford to even back you? So we send a message to the world when that happens to say, if you're wealthy and in wealthy circles, you deserve to shape like technology that influences the world. If you're from underrepresented backgrounds, we're not necessarily creating technology for you, it will buy you. And that's a problem that just didn't sit well with me. And that's what led me and inspired me to start the Angel Investing School, which was not meant to be a business. It was just a vehicle for me in an efficient way to democratize access to this education and close this education and knowledge gap for both founders and investors. Like, what is angel investing? How does it work? What's the process of becoming an angel investor? And how do I fundraise from an angel? It's a big knowledge gap there, even till today. We've already started skimming the surface and solving it. It's why we're working on this open source platform, Open Angel, to democratize access at scale to this information and knowledge that we've learned from doing it for 3 years, training over 700 people, training 100 black Googlers and helping them set up the Black Angel Group and invest $4 million in the last 2.5 years into startups, or training up the Latinx network in Google to set up their syndicate, or Stripe, or like, we've learned a lot of great lessons through doing this work. And I realized to achieve our mission, I need to democratize access in an open sourced way so that we can reach like hundreds of thousands rather than the 50 people that are coming on our privately held experiences, like a private members club. So we're turning into more of like a community center than a private members club.
I like that.
But it's a real challenge because it turns the financial model on its head. But what people don't realize is, when you're someone that creates so much value into the world, the signal that comes back is, no, I want you on this project as a trusted advisor. I had a call with a group in Alabama today. I won't reveal who they are or what they do, but it was about flying out to Alabama to have a dinner with some high net worths around the mentality and mindset of moving from like real estate and land entrepreneurs to mentoring and supporting entrepreneurs to eventually get into a space where they can invest in entrepreneurs. On the surface, people are like, it's a niche opportunity. But for me, it's like I put so much signal out into the world. Like, I'm not surprised that I come up, whether on Google or in conversation, as like, you need to speak to Andy. And I think people don't realize the value and power of that. Instead, people are very fast sometimes to think, I need to launch a website and say, this is my services, this is what I do. Whereas for me, it's like, as long as I can have a conversation, authentic connection, and really understand your context and your problem, I can be very honest around whether I can help you or not. And this is my day rate or this is my monthly fee for doing that type of work, solving these people problems, which is at the heart of 90% of the work that I do.
I think it's all about like putting yourself and like what image you want to put yourself across, because...
And everyone's different, by the way. Like, I don't think everyone should be a content creator.
Because I was going to ask this, like, because it's understanding which version of yourself you want to show, and if you're comfortable showing a multivariate version of yourself. Where, like with you, for example, going from like being a writer to being a product manager to being a founder to being a MD of a
constantly reinventing myself.
Constantly reinventing yourself. And like, to some people that might seem like you're unsure, but to you it seems like you're already on your journey to like a bigger plan.
And it's like, look at what I achieve in these things. Like if you like we talk about Backstage and the fact that we launched accelerators in these 4 countries, raised 2.5 million and invested into founders. That's achieved in 1 year. Do you know what I mean?
That's crazy.
Or World First, it led to an outcome in terms of an acquisition. Or Elixir, it led to them floating on the alternative investment market. So when I'm part of a project, look at the outcomes that are achieved from those projects.
Yeah.
Angel Investing School, training over nearly 700 people, including that Black Angel group that I mentioned from Google. So the results speak for themselves, and I'm actually dedicated to results. I just do it in the way that I know how, which is through that authentic connection and solving people problems.
Yeah. Because there was between, say, Backstage and like going all in on Angel Investing School.
Yeah.
So like, what was that?
You asked me about like identity and how I felt or demotive. So after Backstage, the honest truth is the immediate opportunity that everyone was talking to me about is like, you should start a fund, or you should start a fund with Andy and Anissa. There was money available in that first 6 months to raise a fund 100%, 5 to 10 million. Very confident that I would have closed that. It wasn't the right thing to do. I needed space to go in the wilderness like Moses and just discover and learn and get back that feeling and what do I want to do next? What do I want to be known for? How does achieving this mission unlock my next mission? And that's what I think as I continue to reinvent myself. Is actually I'm just showing, expressing different facets of who I am. The Angel Investing School is like an app on top of the operating system. Yeah, I mean, I could have started 9 different businesses, same business model as the Angel Investing School, and I would have got to 6-7 figures as well, because I know how to express myself and my skill set in order to build that type of business. I was very confident in starting that business that if I just deliver so much value in the content that I provide and the events that I speak at, it has to come round. And it's played true. And I think that I could have started the property investing school, the stocks and shares investing school, the wealth creation network across all of those schools. I have high confidence I would have been successful. I think it's even a good idea now, even I'm sharing it with you. Yeah.
There's a game, but bro, like what you just said, it just made it clear. It's like give, and then raises your profile, and then you come back with it. It's like having a personal brand to an extent.
But when I say that, the skill set is my safety net, and I know how to utilize in different environments. This year, I've been doing a lot of work with Tesco around inclusive leadership through a non-profit that I do a lot of work with called SALT, which is all about social mobility and getting black talent into the FMCG sector, so into companies like Tesco, Asda, Mars, McVitie's, all of these like FMCG brands. And on the other side, they do leadership development work all around like shaping inclusive cultures for leaders and their teams. So I've been doing some of these workshops and facilitating workshops, and one team in Tesco has a good experience and they recommend me to the next. And they recommend me to the next, recommend me to the next. So what is it about that essence and that experience in 2.5 hours that gives you the confidence to say that I want to recommend you to this other team in Tesco? And what are you hearing other team that you're saying, I want to have a conversation, see if you can do it for us? And I ask those questions so that I can write down that feedback, put it into my journal, my tracker, and remind myself of who I am. Yeah, Andy, you're great. No, you're great at this. You're great at this. Look what they said. Look at what they said. So every 6 months when I'm looking through my tracker, and I've been doing this for 9 years now, I remind myself of who I am, what I'm great at, and where I want to optimize and spend more time versus reduce and do less time. And it's almost like having a Google Analytics of my life. And not many people have that, but that's my strategic advantage. Because I pay so much attention to what's being said and shared, and I track it, and then I connect the dots between it.
We're gonna go. So talk to me about your actual methodology with this journal. Like, is it Notion? Is it
I need
Google
to create
thing?
a course, or I need to create. No, I do, because I'm actually really passionate about it, and I actually think there's a whole thing that I need to do there that I'll probably do in the next 12 months, and you probably heard it here first. But so in Notion, which is like my operating system, my whole business life, everything is in Notion now, and I use it in a very sophisticated way now. I'm like a super user. They could ask me to come to the conference and I'll give a talk. Like, really? I'm that much of a super fan of Notion. But in my tracker is essentially like a database, and in that database, I could say like recording Yemi's podcasts really made me think about, and I might list out these things. I might attach a picture of us together in that moment. I might attach a picture of a WhatsApp message you send me after. And I might capture that and say the headline, which is what I call like my top line category is this was to do with work and business, but also emotions and spirituality, and maybe lessons and knowledge. That's some of my categories. Health and fitness is another. Marriage is another. Okay, so I select the right category. And then my subcategory is all about, is this a win, a lesson learned, an action, or a testimonial, which is what I call feedback. There's no failure or losses there. And that's again to do with my mindset. I've never failed as long as I've paid attention and extracted a lesson from the experience. Oh, Backstage failed to raise another fund. Yeah, it may have. I didn't fail. I got a lot of lessons from that, and that led me to the angel investing school. So that's the mentality I put in my children as well. Like, what did you learn from that? What went well? What didn't go so well? What could you do differently? All right, it wasn't too bad then. We've limited your failure. It wasn't a failure because you've taken and extracted lessons from it. So that's a philosophy of how we live a life as a family, let alone me as a person. I got that from America, that badge of honor. So you can see the common strands and ties between where I've been, what I've experienced, and how I think and operate today.
Brilliant, bro. In my head, I'm thinking, because I think I tried to do like a journal on Notion, but I just found it too clunky, but I want to try it again.
Yeah, well, I can share my template with you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and I also create something called a personal user guide. So typically I share it with like a new partner that I'm working with, or new client, or new employees that join my team. But this personal user guide shares like who I am, my background, how I grew up, how I think, how I make decisions, what my values are, poetry that I like, what I do when I'm stressed, what a typical day looks like to me, how best to communicate with me. It's an actual user guide into who Andy is. And what it does is psychologically, it helps you to think about the common strands in your life to what you've just read. Yeah. So that next interaction we have is so much more human, because what I realize is that people really connect with my brokenness more than they do with my shiny self. So the more broken I am, the more they connect, because they're broken too, all of us to different degrees.
It's so interesting that you would describe yourself as broken, because to the untrained eye or to the outside eye, they'll be like, Andy knows what he's doing. He's got the MBE, he's got this, he's got that. Everything he touches turns to gold. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting that you actually portrayed yourself as a broken person.
Because I feel like that's where people connect with me, that authenticity of knowing that I'm on a journey, I'm not perfect, I'm still learning, I'm still improving, I make mistakes, I'm actually just like you. So if anything, it should maybe inspire you, to maybe feel like, oh, I can do that too. He's just like me. Yeah. Great. If I have the opposite effect where it feels like he's so far removed from me, then that's a problem. And that's why I do my best to always democratize access to information and knowledge that I'm learning and sharing my wisdom, whether it's through a course, through the Angel Investing School, or a post on LinkedIn, or an event that I'm speaking at, or this podcast. These are all vehicles for me to scale my impact, because I can't always do the one-to-one.
Bro, this has been so good. I've got so many more questions, but we have to wrap up because of time, yeah?
We have to do a part 2 then.
We have to do part 2. But I've got a couple of quick fire questions, yeah, for you. Firstly, again, thank you again, yeah. So my first question, what's a piece of advice that you hear people give all the time, but when you hear it, you actually think it's bad advice?
Do what you love.
Why do you think so?
Because sometimes you haven't discovered what you loved yet. So depending on when you hear that, it might be the wrong time to be doing what you love. You need to discover more about yourself, who you are, your genius, your personal mission, and guess what? You fall in love with things that you get great at.
That is so true. Like, I was having a conversation with my therapist about this and understanding where I get my confidence from. My confidence comes from things that I know, like things that I'm comfortable in doing. And when I'm in areas where I might not necessarily know the answers, I'm at my lowest. Whereas some people can be confident in areas where, I don't know, they can show bravado or whatever. So it's quite interesting. And I think that whole thing about passion as well, like, I guess my next question will go into this, like, what steps would you recommend for someone to find their passion, to find their genius, to find their skill set?
Yeah, so that book I recommended actually is Your Genius at Work. I don't think it's in production anymore, so it's actually really hard to get that book. It is, yeah, it is. But I think it's asking yourself the important questions in life and collating answers from different sources. So what I mean by that is, like, what am I great at? What am I really weak at? What do I enjoy? What do I really dislike doing? And you write that out for yourself. And then for one or two of them, like, what am I great at? Get feedback from colleagues, family members, friends, and look at the commonality. What's the common word? Oh, I keep on saying passion. or they keep on saying I'm a problem solver, or they keep saying that I'm good at teaching. And you start to draw things that you didn't have language about before, but now they've given you language that really resonates. You're like, yeah, there's something there. There's something there. So I think you need to start from that point of paying attention to yourself and who you are, because a company can really swallow you up and make you who they want you to be in service of something greater, which is what they want in the end, which is to serve their vision and their purpose. But you'll get lost if you don't have your own personal vision, your own purpose, your own understanding of your genius and principles.
100%. I've learned that lesson. Like, if you don't spend the time to know what you want, someone else will decide it for you.
It's one of my favorite workshops sometimes with teams. Like, I bring up the company values, I ask about their strengths and their weaknesses, then I ask about their personal values, and then silence. And it's like, how can you adopt these values if you yourself, you're like a rudderless boat? Like, you've got any way the waves are kind of chucking you around because you haven't got any personal values yourself, or boundaries, or it's subconscious, but you never brought it out into the conscious. But you need to start there so that you can really have an unshakable character and mindset and really believe that your skill set is your safety net. You can never believe that if you haven't even got your values written down.
That's amazing. What's a book or film or anything like that you give to people the most?
So many. To say one is hard, but the one that came to mind most immediately was Tuesdays with Maury, because it's just a good reminder of morality and life lessons. I love it.
I agree with that one. And like, if there's one message you'd want to leave the world, what would it be?
We were all born geniuses with a purpose. Some of us just take longer to discover it than others.
I like that. What would your words of encouragement be for our listeners?
Measure your life in decades and not days.
Sick. And then final question. Where can people find you?
Google Andy Ayim.
I love that. My bro, it's a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you.